Cruising to pick up a tranny, boys. Woo! Hell yeah. Beautiful. And it's a Toyota forklift. So the journey to get the new to me transmission and torque converter was a success. So LS430, meet your new transmission. So in case you didn't see the last video where I introduced this LS430, I managed to score a killer deal on it of just $1,500 because it has a bad transmission. And it's not like a bad solenoid or bad fluid or something. There's definitely internal damage in this transmission. It's super slow to engage. It makes terrible noises through all gears. Like I mentioned, that slow to engage. Sometimes it's slow, sometimes it doesn't at all. So it's just in a really bad way. And because these cars are typically so reliable, you can get these used transmissions for not that much money. So I drove a couple of hours to pick this up, which was $650. So all in so far, we're at $2,250. But as you know, in terms of the interior condition of the car, it's in great shape. Speakers are in good shape. AC works. It has 170,000 miles, but for an LS, that barely broken in. But for those of you that have been following me since I imported the Celsior and fully restored the suspension and engine bits on that one, you know that there is a lot of work to do to this car that I want to do to make it perfect outside of just swapping that transmission, which is a huge job in itself. But I wanted to dig into the car, get some of these covers off, and really start to inspect what else needs to be done. So to do a quick inspection of the underbody, just kind of check for leaks and suspension and stuff, let's go ahead and get it on the ramps. I did some measuring. Turns out LS430s are very long, and so even in my little humble abode here, 2-car garage, it's going to be a tight squeeze, which means depending on what we want to do as far as engine and transmission, we might have to leave it out there and pull it like, at the door of the garage and bring it in. I don't know. That'll be decided in a little while. She's been sitting a couple days. Let's see how she does. Ooh, breathe on the key, dude. She fires right up. That sounds really good. Oh yeah, so many good noises. Grinding, squeaking, dinging, popping. Woo-hoo-hoo! Oh man. Let's see, is your car supposed to make this noise? I don't know. It's funny because when you close the door, you can actually hear the awful grinding sound worse. So, let me show you what I mean. When I put the car down and drive, I'm off. Well, we're moving forward now, but watch, if I put it into reverse, we're not gonna go anywhere. Oh, look, it's making a liar out of me. However, it sounds absolutely disgustingly awful, like a bag of rocks. I wish it would just be broken all the time. This is what I'm talking about. Now it just functions. But I mean, obviously it still sounds terrible, but okay, enough dilly-dallying, let's get it up. Alrighty, what awaits us? Oh boy. Oh boy. Oh boy. What do we have going on here? That is a mess. I've been wondering, was this car actually leaking? Or was it some of my other junk that was leaking? No, definitely this junk. What is it? I know that this oil filter housing has a propensity to leak, and it looks like there's some coming off of the oil filter right there. Looks like our alternator is absolutely doused in it all the way down. That looks like it's kind of coming down from the valve cover, just like on the LS400 on my Celsior. Yeah, because you can see it, like, you can see way up there, all the way down, trickling down, all the hoses, all the lines. I wonder if I mean, that's oil right here on the rack. The steering rack in this car is extremely expensive, so I really hope that's not bad. Fingers crossed there. I'm gonna keep looking. So in this car, I'm not 100% sure, but I do believe we have an upper and a lower oil pan. You can see the black kind of line between there. And if I'm not mistaken, both of those are held on with sealant FIPG. Oh, is that a power steering leak right there in this joint? Looks like that line might be bad, because that's definitely more red than oil should be. Lots of gunk down here. So I've continued hunting quite a bit, and I mean, there's a lot of oil residue over here, but it cleans up on that side somewhat, and the steering rack on this side is dry. So that actually kind of tells me that really it's just these valve covers just raining hell down upon the rest of the components down here. And it looks like both of those upper and lower oil pans are still on the factory sealant. So nobody's ever been in there, which means that they probably are leaking. I mean, I think that's really good news. That's oil leaks, which are no big deal, things I want to sort out anyway. Quite honestly, the truck leaking transmission fluid and my BMW leaking oil, even after I replaced so much stuff on it, is really exhausting. And I had the Celsior dialed in perfectly. It didn't leak anything and it was buttery smooth. So I want to get that thing to this point as well. Now let's take a look at the suspension, and then also we're going to take a look at some stuff on the top side. So more good news in here. The steering boot, when the rack was bad on my Land Cruiser, was filled up with oil, and there's nothing in there in this case, which is great. It oozed out of the little bellows there. Tie rods are tight on both sides. None of these ball joints are leaking. That one's a little bit wet, but it's not actually leaking. It's just got some grime on it. The upper control arm still looks great. No leaking on any of those. The sway bar bushings and links are still all solid. Shocks have seen better days, I think. In terms of the suspension up here, again, ball joint looks solid. Bushings all look fine. I mean, they're definitely not going to be like perfect factory, but is not something that we need to be swapping right away. I mean, I will, for sure. I want to. But you know, there are definitely things that need to happen. Like you can see inside the shock there, the little bellow is torn. You shouldn't be able to see that silver vertical rod. But overall, I mean, that's great. And the same thing's true on the other side. Suspension looks pretty much the same quality there. So now what I want to do is go ahead and get off some of these covers, kind of take a look under the hood at some of the other things that we need to address. Oh, and of course, I forgot to mention, I did buy new hood struts, but the factory ones have hardware that's built into them. And of course, the new ones don't include it. So that's super awesome. But while I was over here, what I did notice as well, something which is pretty cool, is that none of the terminals are bolted down. Woohoo! That's pretty cool. Probably causing all kinds of issues. That's probably why the gauges wiggle like that when the car starts up. And who knows what else, other kind of electrical gremlins this could be causing. So right off the bat, I'm noticing quite a few things that I don't like. Namely these rusty clamps and bolts. This hose looks absolutely terrible, and this is to do with the evap system on like the fuel side. This is our PCV hose. That one looks okay. This outer sheathing looks pretty terrible, and those hoses are not very expensive. I think it's about 10 bucks or so. Obviously 10 bucks here and there does add up quite a bit, but I want to make sure that this thing is perfect. We're looking okay right there. Shock tower has seen better days, that's for sure. Our brake booster hose right there is absolutely annihilated. It's all cracked and ruined, so we're gonna have to sort that out. And then all these little vacuum caps, I'm surprised to see these. I don't know why this would be. This car is an early model 01, so it's got the vacuum cap here and here. There's also one back up there. There's another one there. I'm not sure why that is. Maybe there's some option or some extra that's not included on this particular car that those would be, you know, like there would be something there otherwise. Then of course our power steering reservoir, these have a filter in them, and it's being super yellowed, does not bode well. And we're gonna be replacing those power steering lines anyway. So we'll wanna go ahead and do that. These little hoses right here usually are cracked and hard as a rock, and this one absolutely is. That one is supposed to be rubber, but it is basically steel. Let's go ahead and get some more of these covers out of the way. On the LS400, it has a similar cowl like this, but they're bolts on the left and right edges. Give me those back. I don't want clips, I want bolts. Alrighty, and removing that cover reveals some surface rusted little radiator mounts here. Got some dirt and some crusty stuff along the top of the coolant reservoir, and then we have a Toyota, but China radiator? I don't know about all that. I've actually seen a number of videos and posts online recently that these radiators tend to explode at like 170 to 250,000 miles, and we have 178,000. So we are right in that range of needing a new radiator. So that's probably gonna go on the list too. The OEM ones are expensive, but that's just the way to go. Just not mess around with the cooling system at all. And then looking down in there, we do have a Toyota stamp on the tensioner right there. That's a good sign. It didn't actually look like it was, but it certainly is, or at least it's supposed to be one. And then that idler pulley looks to be pretty well shot. It looks pretty rusty in there, so we're definitely gonna need the idler pulley. Luckily, there's an OE one from Koyo available, which is quite a bit less expensive than the OEM one. Let's go ahead and get this air box out of the way and continue kind of digging. Almost. One clip out of 1, 2, 3. That's awesome. The clips are super annoying, I'm not gonna lie, but in the interest of doing it properly, we will definitely replace these because they're cheap. Alrighty, so airbox is out of the way. This little MAF connector was already broken, so I'm gonna have to get a new one of those and repin it. Then, interestingly, on the back of the airbox, there's some kind of connector and a vacuum hose, which is what those are down there. Don't know what that does, but we'll find out. All right, so anything new worthwhile for us here. So that power steering line right there that runs from the reservoir down into the cooler loop, that is most definitely shot, but you can look and see there's that valve cover gasket leak on that corner little triangle piece, and that is definitely not ideal. So we're gonna have to do valve cover gaskets for sure. Oh, and now it's raining while it's sun shining. That's hashtag Florida things. All right, now let's get this intake tube out of the way because I wanna see down more into the, the cylinder head side here. It's holding me up. There we go. Oh boy, that came out violently. Another little vacuum hose here that goes down to the power steering. That is one I'll definitely need to note and replace because those are so old and brittle. And then this other one, oh, look at that. That one is down to PCV on that valve cover, and that is split and destroyed. I bet you somebody's known about that for a long time and just never bothered to replace it. Everything looks fine from here. I mean, like I said, valve cover gaskets for sure, gotta do that. Injectors all look fine. Front covers here, definitely got some oil seepage. I guess these are different because on the 2UZ, on the Land Cruiser, they're plastic covers and these are aluminum here, and it looks like they have some kind of rubber gasket behind them. So I have to take a look at that. But with what I'm going to talk about here in just a few minutes, as far as further plans, that will kind of be one of the things we could potentially address. So, I mean, overall, we're not in bad shape here. Not seeing anything alarming out of the ordinary. Definitely quite a few parts that we need to replace, but most of this is just general preventative maintenance. Look at that smear of dirt inside the throttle body. That's interesting. And then there's some crusty stuff on the throttle body as well, so I might have to take that off and clean it. But, I mean, unless I'm missing something, we look to be in pretty good shape, honestly. Obviously, I don't have the luxury of a lift, so I can't quite as easily today check things like wheel bearings and, play in the suspension and stuff, but I don't have any reason to believe that there's excessive play in that sense. Here comes more rain. It's funny because it was sunny all day, so I thought maybe I would just do this in the driveway. I'm very glad that I didn't. So now with our nice soothing rain ASMR sounds, I wanted to talk to you about the plan for this car moving forward. So I've been giving this a lot of thought as far as whether I wanted to try to drop the transmission, leave the engine in, and kind of do the other work like you saw, valve cover gaskets and stuff like that with the engine in. But the problem is that I don't think I'm gonna be able to get the car physically high enough to get the transmission out in a reasonable way. I think that being able to get underneath it on a lift makes it much more ideal because you can use a proper transmission jack. I took a look and my jack stands go up 16 inches. And then when I'm working on the Land Cruiser, I use these wood platforms that I built to kind of boost it up more. But even that's not going to be enough. I mean, the bell housing of the transmission I measured, and it's basically it's 16 inches. So, I mean, there's basically no spare clearance to try to drop it. And I just don't think I'm going to be able to do it in the garage like that. So what does that leave us with? Well, fortunately, I already have an engine crane. So I think that's the route we're going to go. I think we're going to pull the engine and the transmission together as one unit. There's really not a whole lot that would have to come off to get the engine out as one unit. I mean, of course, I'll need to disconnect the wiring harness and kind of lay that over. But then you would basically pull the power steering pump off, V-belt and power steering pump off, disconnect the compressor from the side of the block. Then those two would just kind of live in the car. But once this comes out, I mean, I got to get the radiator and the expansion tank out as well. But once those are out, then there are some of the things that are incredibly difficult in the car, like oil pan gasket, and that upper oil pan would require dropping the subframe. Again, dropping the subframe is not something I could do easily without a lift. So there's a ton of stuff that we'll be able to tackle on this car. Because really, as we've seen, this car doesn't need immediate suspension work. From the little bit of driving that I've done, it definitely needs 1 or 2 shocks and kind of a shock mount or two, but nothing really crazy. It feels really nice and smooth, and I'm going to address all the suspension problems in time. probably needs some brakes and stuff like that. But for the most part, it is primarily things like oil leaks, you know, belts, tensioners, stuff like that. And then, of course, the big mamma jamma, the transmission too. So I think all of that kind of balancing out what needs to be addressed, having the engine and transmission come out as one unit, sitting here on the garage floor will mean it's so much more just realistic and straightforward. And I think it will end up being quicker in the long run. Another huge hurdle if we were to try to just pull the transmission out would be that we'd have to drop the exhaust, because you can see further down, the transmission would kind of come between and hit the exhaust pipes. But in the case of pulling the engine and transmission together, what we would need to do is basically just disconnect it at the Y pipes, which we can't see from right here. Kind of at the top of this pipe where it joins to the actual header on the cylinder head, then that's where we would disconnect it. So that would be a whole lot easier too. And also when the engine is out, we can clean all of this better than we ever could. We'll have access that otherwise you just wouldn't get. So that would be really nice too, because all this stuff is so crummy and gross that I am not gonna leave it this way. Overall, I'm pretty blown away that the suspension is in such great shape after 175,000 miles and 24 years on the road. Pretty incredible. It really is a testament to the legendary status of these cars. So there we have it. A transmission swap is coming along with many other engine goodies. I'm gonna pull all of this out hopefully in the next episode and get it mounted up on the engine stand and so on. Toyota is very nice to us, and they gave us a handy dandy hook right here and a handy dandy hook back there. How perfect is that? I can't even begin to tell you how excited I am for this project. The last video did so well. Thank you every single one of you who watched, and especially those of you new subscribers to the channel. I am more than happy to have you guys. Lots more to come on this thing. I can't wait until this thing is my daily. That's what it's gonna be. I've been dailying the Land Cruiser for some time, and of course I love it. I've said before, I love the 100 series platform, but this thing just has an allure. It has a very special allure for me. And of course, this is definitely not going to be the last UCF chassis car that I own nor restore. So if you're interested in participating in this project and you want to see more videos like this in the future, please consider hitting subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.